This is not a video about why you should feel compelled to cut down on your screen time because we're spending way too much time on our phones and screens are a huge addiction. I don't believe that guilt is ever an effective catalyst for long-term effective change. Instead, in this video, I'm going to talk a bit about my mental processes for sort of coming to the realization that I don't want to be spending as much time on my phone. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the methods that I've used to set up the screen time feature on my phone in order to achieve that goal. So hopefully this will resonate with somebody. In my very few years of life, I have learned that the progressively older that we get, the more responsibilities that we have, which means that we have less time to pursue the things that we're interested in. And I certainly have experienced that in the last couple of years with college, as my schedule has become more and more and more tight, and I've had less time to pursue the things that are fun, like fun projects like recording YouTube videos. This last spring semester especially, the workload in my classes significantly increased as I'm doing more complex like math and science and computer science classes. And it's been really, really difficult for me to find time to do the things that I really want to do. And that's been really difficult. And so I've thought through two solutions to this problem that we kind of all share. The first solution is to do everything that we're doing currently much faster and more efficiently. And the second option is to cut down on the things that we're less interested in order to save time for the things that are most important to us. Now, I think that the first option is good, and I support that, and I am trying to do that all the time. But in this video, I'm going to talk about the second option, which is cutting back on the things that are less important to us. So here's sort of what I did to process through the things that I want to do in my free time. I got a piece of paper and I made a list of all the things that I want to do with my free time. So this is like hobbies or like even like business ideas or things to do for fun or like projects and skills that I want to acquire. So for example, for me, I really want to spend some free time working on YouTube. I want to do like fun video projects. That's super broad, but it's true. I want to learn and like work on photography. I want to spend time with my friends and family. I want to pursue exercise. I want to learn 3D printing. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I haven't started that yet. I also am really interested in cubing. Rubik's Cubes are a lot of fun. Additionally, I think that it would be fun to work on like magic. Like close-up magic is really interesting. And those are sort of everything on my list of like things that I would possibly like to do with my free time. And then once I had my list, I sat down and ranked these items in order of importance to me. And I ranked them on 3 criteria. What is fun and enjoyable for me to do? What refills my tank? So like I spend a lot of time working. What can I do, stop working, do it for a while, and it really recharges me and makes me want to go back and do more work? And then third, what skills do I want to accomplish? So looking back a year from now, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, what skills do I want to have acquired because I've been working through them? And then once I have this functional list, I put on the list the additional item of like screen time. So for example, the main screen time that I do is watching YouTube videos. So I compare like, where does YouTube sit on this list in terms of what I actually want to do? Where does it rank with the 3 criteria of what I really enjoy doing, what refills my tank, and what I, looking back in the future, what I would want to have accomplished? And most of the time when I do this, I find that screen time falls really, really low on my list. It's not that satisfying to do. I don't tend to get that much enjoyment out of like scrolling Instagram or watching YouTube videos. So that's kind of a red flag for me. The other thing that's helpful for me to do is to do a direct comparison between different items on the list. So for example, I think to myself, if I were to sit down for 30 minutes, would it be more beneficial for me, or would I be happier if I spent 30 minutes watching a YouTube video or spent 30 minutes going on a walk with my family? Like which one would bring more satisfaction and fulfillment? And when I think about it like on a very analytical level, I always come to the conclusion that I would have more fun and be happier if I spent time with my family. Or I'll compare, would I rather spend 15 minutes scrolling on Instagram, or would I rather spend 15 minutes like playing around with my Rubik's Cube? And for me, it's almost always, I would actually have more fun spending time on a Rubik's Cube. So why shouldn't I do that? And I've realized that the reason why I don't do that is because there's this sort of paradox where in the short term, it feels more fun to sit down and play around on my phone. But in the long term, I much prefer, after the fact, the fun that I have from playing around with the Rubik's Cube or spending time with my family or playing with photography. The only real exception for me is that spending time on my phone is helpful and it is a good way to decompress and relax, but I found that for me, it's only really helpful in short increments. It can help me to calm down and like be ready to do more studying if I spend some time like watching fun YouTube videos, but there's a limit. For me, it's like I can only really spend maybe like 30 minutes or an hour before that benefit has worn off. And so I've realized if I want to maximize that, then it would be best to limit the time that I spend on YouTube by an hour. And that's what I'm doing with screen time. And this is how I've come to the realization that I want to cut back on my screen time. Because when I look at what I'm doing and I consider like what I actually want to be doing, I actually don't want to be spending time like watching YouTube videos because it doesn't match up on my list. It doesn't rank high enough. And so that's how I've kind of come to the realization that I want to cut back on that. So let's spend a couple minutes talking about how I have optimized screen time to achieve that goal. First of all, let's talk apps. If you're on iOS, iOS has a very popular app called Screen Time. You might not have it set up, so you might have to go to settings and turn it on, but it works phenomenally well. If you're on Android, I've heard the apps Break Free and Social Fever are both really good. Don't get too caught up in like which app purchase. They all pretty much do the same thing, and the special features that each one has is like not really that important. As long as it tells you how much time you're spending on each app, that's pretty much the most important thing. The only concern to look out for is privacy, because the app that you're using should be reputable enough, because you're going to give them pretty much access to everything you have on your phone. So be careful with that. But other than that, just pick whatever app you can and it should work fine. All right, I have a couple pointers from lessons that I've learned trying to use screen time. The first one is to make the screen time goal realistic and sustainable. We want something that we can realistically stick to for a long period of time. This is pretty good general goal setting advice. I found that going in cold turkey and jumping straight down to setting a goal of like 15 minutes a day on screen time is really ineffective and super discouraging, because you try it and you find that it's like really difficult to actually stick to that, and so we're more likely to flip back and just dump screen time altogether. Instead, I found it more useful to start big and then work small, sort of, if you're thinking in terms of time. So say we currently spend 5 hours a day on our phone. A good starting goal might be spending only 2.5 hours a day. And then once we do that effectively, we can cut it down a bit more. And I found that much more successful than going cold turkey. So definitely slow and steady wins the race on this one. Pointer number 2, very self-explanatory, is to just stick with it. Now, we need to remember that self-discipline is a muscle, and the more that we practice at like training ourselves to stick to our schedule, the more likely we are to actually be able to hold to it. Beyond that, I found it helpful to fill my time with the things that I'm trying to be doing. So rather than just cutting away all my screen time, deliberately plan to do things during those windows of time that are on your list of things that you'd rather be doing. All right, pointer number 3 is the feature called Downtime. Now this is a feature where you can set it up where, for example, you won't be able to use any entertainment apps on your phone early in the morning or late at night. I think this is really useful. So first, in the morning, I set it up so that I don't use any of my apps on my phone in the morning. And I find this really, really useful. The International Data Corporation found that 80% of us use our phone first thing when we get up in the morning. And when I've thought about this a bit, I found that it's really more effective to not use my phone early in the morning. I've seen a bunch of benefits. So first of all, when I wake up, I feel the most refreshed and my brain power is at like maximum capacity. So it feels to me like a waste of my energy to be spending my time focusing on something that like doesn't really matter. Whereas if I were to reorient my schedule and focus on the things that matter to me most, doing those things first in the morning, then I'll be able to accomplish more over the course of the day. Because like I could scroll on Instagram at 4:30 in the afternoon with like zero brain power left, and that still works. Whereas if I do the important tasks later on in the day when I have weak brain power, that's not as effective. So when I wake up, my first priority is like, let's get the things done. Let's work on my morning routine. Let's, start working on school as soon as possible so that I maximize that like refreshed brain activity from sleeping the whole night before. Beyond this, there's a lot of research to indicate that when we get up and the first thing we do is we check our phones, our notifications, that increases our stress and anxiety levels that kind of has an effect on us for the entire rest of the day. Whereas if we stay off of our phone and we do other things, then we will be more stress-free. So I think that's a really big advantage. And honestly, the biggest thing for me for why I don't use my phone early in the morning is because it's a slippery slope for wasting the entire morning, even sometimes the entire day. I think that the trajectory that we set early in the morning tends to be the trajectory for the entire morning or the entire day. So when I get up and I spend a couple minutes on my phone and then I sit in bed for a bit and then I go downstairs and I listen to a podcast while I'm eating my breakfast, it's really, really difficult for me to flip the switch and get back to working. And so when I limit my phone and I get straight to work, I set the trajectory for my day and I'm way less likely to fall into the slippery slope of wasting the entire morning. And for me, that is absolutely huge. On the other end of the spectrum, you can set up your downtime feature to limit your ability to use your phone during the evening hours. And I think that the main benefit of this is that it's not good to use our screens before bed for a sleep perspective, because the blue light gets into our eyes and it makes it harder to sleep. I have an entire video on the research behind this. So it's recommended that we kill our screens, metaphorically, an hour or two before bedtime. So I think this is a really big sell. I don't personally actually do this. It's really difficult for me to do this, but definitely there's benefit to it. The fourth and final point is app limits. Now, you could just go on your phone every day and check how much time you use for every app together in a big number. I don't find this as useful because I don't want to feel like it's counting against me when I spend time like texting or on phone calls, stuff like that. So instead, I find it much more useful to set limits for individual apps during the day. So for example, I spend most of my time on YouTube. That's like the main thing that I do on my phone. So I specifically limit YouTube to X number of minutes per day, like an hour or 45 minutes. And I find that much more successful than setting a limit that's like broad on everything that I do on my phone. And I think the beauty of this is that when I limit the amount of time that I have to, say, an hour on YouTube every day, it creates scarcity when I'm spending time on YouTube. So when I would normally sit down and watch a video, if I'm scrolling through and I see a video that I sort of want to watch, then I probably will click on it and watch the video, even if I only sort of want to watch it. Whereas if I have a limit and I know I only have 60 minutes to watch videos, and this video is 10 minutes long, I have to think to myself, is this worth 1/6 of the time that I have on screen time for YouTube for that day? And if it's not, then I skip it. This is great because it cuts back on the things that don't actually give me enjoyment, like on YouTube, and it reinstates the sort of scarcity of my time. And that's good because our time is a valuable and scarce resource. To me, it's kind of like having a budget when you go shopping. Like if you go to Target and you have a budget of $50, then if you see something that's $30, you'll think a lot harder about buying it than if you don't have a budget. So in my opinion, app limits are definitely the way to go. All right, those are my tips on how to use screen time to maximize your time. Hopefully that resonated with somebody. If you liked this video, you might like the video that I will link up here about how I type really, really quickly without a bunch of practice. And I'd like to end today's video with a quote from Dr. Seuss. Quote, "How did it get so late so soon? It's night before it's afternoon. December's here before it's June. My, how the time has flown. How did it get so late so soon?"